Hello everyone, Stepan here. Sorry for not making any videos for a long time, for 2 days, but I had a lot of work and I just had no time. And today was a good day to make a video finally, because the Paris leg of the Grand Chess Tour has started today, and the Rapid portion was played on day one. Of course, 3 games were played, and the format is pretty much the same as in Leuven in the Your Next Move Blitz and Rapid. And first they're going to play 9 Rapid games and then 18 Blitz games. And after winning the Leuven Your Next Move Blitz and Rapid, Wesley So started day 1 of Paris remarkably as well, and he scored 2 out of 3. He defeated 2 players and lost to Mamedyarov, and he is currently sharing first place with Anand and Aronian, who managed to get the same score. But this game I'm about to show you is I like it because he managed to get Maxime Vachier-Lagrave out of his theoretical preparation, surely, and they were out of book on move 7, so it's a completely new approach to the opening. He played the Reti. I mean, the ideas were seen before, but the move order wasn't, and on move 7, as I said, they were out of book completely and no games were played. So a very interesting game. Let's see. Wesley So had the white pieces. He played the Reti, knight to f3. We have c5, inviting the Sicilian defense. Of course, here if white plays e4, then that's the main line, open Sicilian. But we have b3. And here Maxime plays a fairly uncommon line. He plays b6. We have bishop to b2, bishop b7, c4, closing down the queen side, knight to f6, g3, g6, and here bishop takes f6 was played, which has been played before, but it's not the most common plan. Most commonly white is going to play bishop g2 and castle. Now after bishop f6, e takes f6, knight to c3 is played, and here that's the first novelty. Knight to c3 has never been played. Bishop to g2 was the move of choice in the last game, but after knight to c3 this setup is completely new, and of course with the move knight to c3 white is giving black the option of capturing the knight and ruining his kingside pawn structure, which Maxime Vachier-Lagrave does, but I believe that's not the best decision in this situation. I think he should have kept his light squared bishop, but since Wesley gave up his dark squared bishop, his main attacking weapon, perhaps Maxime figured that he could do the same. Now we have bishop takes f3, and after e takes f3, I believe that white stands slightly better. At least he is a tempo up in a fairly symmetrical position. Now here, instead of bishop takes f3, after knight to c3, I believe that black's best try was the move f5, because after f5 you are preparing to develop the bishop on the long diagonal, and you are constantly going to be causing trouble for white along the queen side, and you can castle comfortably and have a safe position, perhaps even prepare the move d5 in this position, which is of course the main break black is trying to attain. But we have bishop takes f3, e takes f3, and now knight to c6, a completely symmetrical position. But as I said, white is a tempo up, and that means that he has a theoretical advantage. Bishop g2, bishop g7, and now since white is a tempo up, he gets to play a check, which he couldn't have played otherwise. Now we have queen to e2 check, and of course here black could cover the check with the queen or with the knight, but perhaps Maxime wanted to go for a win. Of course, in rapid chess, you can't really draw with the black pieces. You have to go for a win every game. So he played king to f8, not misplacing his knight or offering a queen trade. And now after castles, it's clear that Wesley So has an advantage visually. Of course, his king is castled, his rook is developed, and black's rook isn't. So that's one thing. Now here we have f5. We have f4, doing the same thing. Once again, almost a completely symmetrical position. Both sides have weaknesses on d4 and d5 respectively, on b4 and b5 of course as well, and the knights have 2 perfect outposts. Both sides have monster bishops along the long diagonals. And the difference is that Wesley has a safe king and MVL has a completely misplaced king and undeveloped rook. So with that thought in mind, let's continue. Here bishop to f6 was played, and that's a great move. That move is preventing the queen from entering e7 and virtually freeing up the knight to move into the d4 square. So this is solidifying the e7 square. We have rook a to e1, king to g7, opening up the rook to make sure he could finally develop. Queen to d3, getting away from the glare of the rook in advance. Rook c8, rook to e3, preparing to double the rooks, knight to d4 now. And of course the rook had to move before that, because knight to d4 wasn't possible. The bishop would just take the rook, take the exchange. Knight to b5, and this is the point at which Wesley So made a mistake. Knight to b5 is, I believe, from a human perspective, an unnatural move. Why would you double up your pawns? I mean, what's the purpose of that? Why not just gain a tempo on the bishop on f6? I mean, if the bishop wishes to move, if he doesn't, I mean, yeah, there's actually no way to save the bishop if you play knight to d5. So knight to b5 I can't understand, and I also can't understand why MVL didn't go for taking and simply ruining the pawn structure, because after knight takes b5, c takes b5, I believe that black is equal. This pawn is a weakness. If you defend it, then black can easily create a passed pawn here. So yeah, he should have taken. But after knight to b5, MVL played a6, which I think isn't a good idea, because now after knight takes, bishop takes, I believe that black does have a more active bishop, but remember that white can always enter this square and attack the f7 pawn. It does gain a tempo on the rook, but I'm sure that that doesn't mean that much. Rook to e2. Still, the position has now lost the imbalance, because the black king is now actually more useful on g7 than the white king is pinned on g1. So I believe that by some weird course of events, MVL managed to get the best out of the position despite making mistakes. Now he continues with rook to e8. We have rook fe1, rook takes e2, queen takes e2, of course taking with the queen because you want to take up the file. If he took with the rook, then you don't have that much control. Queen e2, and here the blunder. The blunder which made a completely equal position just losing. I mean, you are positionally losing after what he played. What MVL should have played is the move bishop to f6, simply preventing the queen from entering the e7 square, which he already played once, so he must have been considering the move. Now, after he plays bishop to f6, there really isn't that much white or black could do in order to make progress, because now after bishop d5, queen c7, let's say a4, h5, h4, how do you make progress? Neither side could ever hope for d4 or d5. Neither side could take up the center in any significant way or create an attack. The king side is blocked, the queen side is blocked, and this is just a draw. Perhaps they would have agreed to a draw here. But after queen to e2, MVL didn't play bishop to f6, he played d6, and this now gives Wesley So a chance to infiltrate the position and gain an insurmountable advantage, which just means that all of his pieces are much more active than black's. And another thing is that once you move your pawns to the dark squares, your light squares become weaker, and white's only minor piece is the light squared bishop, so these squares just got even weaker. So I can't really understand the move d6, it weakens too many things in the position, and from here on Wesley So didn't have a hard time converting. However, Maxime might have counted on a tactical possibility, which he miscalculated, but let's see. So queen to e7 was played, of course, entering the position, bishop to f6, not trading the queens, of course, but queen to b7, a5, saving the a pawn, bishop to d5, attacking the f7 pawn. Now he has to defend. Now you can defend with without losing material. You can play rook to c7 or queen to c7. Now, if you play queen to c7, then after queen a6 you have to play rook f8 and the position is equal. I mean, white doesn't really have a way to gain material. But after bishop to d5, Maxime played queen to c7. Now let me show you what he must have thought. Now, of course you can see that the b6 pawn is hanging. His calculation was perhaps that if queen takes b6, if after rook to e7 Maxime takes the queen, then of course if Wesley takes the queen, then of course Wesley is losing, because if queen takes d8, then rook e1 check intermezzo, and after king g2 bishop takes d8, black is a whole rook up. So that's perhaps why Maxime thought that the b6 pawn can't be taken. But after rook to c7 and queen takes b6 and rook to e7, your queen isn't hanging. I mean, it is, but it can't really be taken. Of course, he can't take the queen. He can't move the queen. There's no way to defend the rook. But there's another way to play this position, and Wesley sacrificed the queen to his great advantage. He took the rook. And after rook takes c7, of course, if black captures the rook, then he's just worse. He's going to lose the a-pawn, so he has to take the queen. So now we have queen takes b6. And now, of course, white is going to get the bishop as well. It's not just a rook for the queen, it's rook and bishop. So we have rook takes f7, king to h8, one repetition perhaps to gain more time, king to g7, rook f7 check, king to h8, and now taking the bishop. Yeah, and by the way, I forgot to mention the format of play is rapid, 25 minutes per game with a 10-second delay per move. So if you don't play a move for the first 10 seconds, you lose no clock time. So that's fairly important for the format, because they both might have been in time trouble, although I'm not sure, I haven't seen the game live. Now this position is lost. I mean, the position is so closed that the rook is much stronger, the rook and bishop are much stronger than the queen. Firstly, the bishop is on his perfect square. This is the best square on the board for the light square bishop. It's restricting the king, it's controlling every key diagonal, it doesn't allow any perpetual checks, because if the king is on g2, how do you check it when the bishop is covering this diagonal? So this is just a winning position, and it's a fairly easy conversion. I mean, there's nothing black can do to survive. We have queen b4, attacking the d2 pawn. Now in exchange, rook takes d6, queen takes d2, rook to c6, attacking c5, queen to d4, king to g2, king g7, rook c7 check, king to h8, h4, h5, a4, and here Maxime resigned. Now, why did he resign? Can't the queen do something? Firstly, you can't even check the king, there's no way. Secondly, you can't defend all of your pawns. Thirdly, there's no moves to make. He's in complete Zugzwang. You can't move the king. Okay? You can't move the queen without losing the c5 pawn. You can't do anything. You can't move any pawns. If g5 is the only move, then just takes. So you can't move anything, and it's his move. The best move would be queen to c3, and now an exchange of pawns, rook c5, queen takes b3, but now rook takes a5, and after, let's say, queen to b6, simply rook to a8 check, rook to a8 check, and the rook is defended, and after the king moves, the pawn is just marching up the board. You can't stop it. The whole position is perfect. Black can't do anything here. So I would say this is a great way to exploit someone's mistake, and d6 is the moment at which Maxime gave Wesley an opportunity to win, and Wesley So just converted immediately. He found this remarkable queen sacrifice, won the b6 pawn, and just went on to win the game easily. A great game, and once again congratulations to Wesley, Vachier-Lagrave and Leuven Rapid for scoring 2 out of 3. And see you tomorrow for day 2 of the Rapid and Blitz. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you got something from this game, and stay tuned for more chess. Thanks very much. Bye.